Welcome to God Connection, the holy area where we decipher the spiritual struggle that lurks in plain sight. Have you ever felt it? That abrupt, unexplainable change in the mood when you come into a place. That is the terrible realization that you have ceased asking for permission to merely exist, and in doing so, you have become public enemy number one. It's a strange, bitter kind of humor, not the kind that makes you laugh, but the kind that forces a grim smile as you realize, so this is how the game is truly played. According to psychological studies, jealousy is one of the most powerful and primal human emotions, frequently outweighing gratitude, admiration, and even love. When this venom is directed at you, it is seldom due to anything you did incorrectly. It is nearly always because you dared to do something truly good in a society that benefits from you being little, mute, and bound. You've become a live, breathing example of their own excuses, a walking reminder that the constraints they cling to like a comfort blanket are, in fact, optional. They don't simply despise you. They have a spiritual allergy to your freedom. By the end of this chapter, you will see with divine clarity why they are so furious, envious, and secretly obsessed with your every action, and why, deep down, they realize the war they are waging isn't with you. It's with the God in you. Number 1. Their anger is not random. It's a confession. When individuals strike out at you for no apparent reason, with anger that seems out of proportion to the circumstances, remember that they are not just having a terrible day. They're giving you an unedited, real, and very intimate confession. You, in essence, have touched a nerve that they desperately wanted to keep concealed from the public and, most crucially, from themselves. Their explosive response is not a spontaneous outburst of emotion, but rather a deliberately aimed flare brought up from a severely wounded portion of their soul. It's as if, without understanding how their inner world works, you've walked into a locked door in the darkest dungeon of their mind, a place where they hold all of their most humiliating anxieties, bitterest regrets, and devastating failures. Without attempting, your light highlighted the cobwebs and grime in that neglected room. And now, confronted with this abrupt exposure, they are forced to choose between confronting the darkness inside or savagely attacking the one who unwittingly switched on the light. The great majority will choose the second choice. Throwing shade at another person is much simpler than coping with one's own shadows. Here's a significant twist. The nerve you struck frequently has little to do with what you said or did at the time. It is about who you are. It represents your steadfast confidence in the face of uncertainty. Your extraordinary resilience enables you to recover from storms that would have permanently sunk others. It is your unwavering determination to play small in a world ripe for mediocrity. Your very existence makes them painfully, vividly aware of the person they secretly wish they had the guts to become. To them, you are not simply another person in the room. You are a live, breathing reflection. However, unlike a traditional mirror, which reflects the neatly managed, smiling picture they portray to the public, you reflect the raw, painful reality they frantically avoid in private. And for an unprepared and unhealed heart, the truth is always seen as a personal assault. This is the underlying dynamic that explains why someone may smile pleasantly at you in a public place yet clench their teeth in silent rage the moment your back is turned. It's why some people can't handle being in your company for too long. Your sincerity breaks the frequency of their performance, causing an agonizing static in their soul. You take away their capacity to hide behind their comfy, well-worn justifications without saying a single thing. Your achievements, your calm under enormous strain, your unwillingness to be broken by conditions that would have shattered them into a million pieces. It all serves as a subtle, scathing exposition of their own inner inconsistencies. That is why their rage seems excessively strong. While you are left standing there thinking, "What on earth did I do to provoke that?" They are screaming on the inside. "How dare they remind me of what I could have been if I had made different choices?" You think you are having a surface-level argument, but you aren't. You're fighting over the fundamental, hidden reality of your own becoming, one they wish you didn't bear so easily. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The greater and more illogical their negative response to you, the deeper and more profound the truth you've exposed about them. People seldom have such tremendous emotional interest in someone who does not matter to them. If they are thus enraged, It is because your entire existence has discovered spiritual riches, which is buried in the exact spot of their soul, where they have set a sign that reads, "Do not dig." Number 2. Jealousy is their recognition in disguise. Jealousy has an odd, almost contradictory way of expressing the ultimate truth without ever saying an honest word. People who are really envious of you are unlikely to acknowledge it. In fact, most will go to great pains to hide it, cloaking it in more socially acceptable forms of disrespect. They will conceal it with bitter sarcasm, which they will later pass off as a joke. They will make backhanded compliments that seem more like insults. "I could never pull that off. I'm not as brave as you." They will welcome you with an unexpected coldness, or they may make an over-the-top, theatrical effort to belittle your accomplishments. Oh, anyone could have done that if they had the same luck. But if you look intently and listen with spiritual ears, you will see that jealousy is just their appreciation of your worth dressed up in a cheap, nasty mask. It is their soul's secret, angry admission. "You have something I desperately want, and it torments me that I do not have it." The something people envy is not necessarily tangible, though it may be. Sure, it may be the lovely life you've created, the concrete achievement you've achieved through your hard work, or the unexpected doors of opportunity that have opened for you. But, more often than not, what genuinely gnaws at them is something ethereal, the type of spiritual currency that cannot be purchased or faked. It may be your unwavering confidence, the way you quietly dominate your territory without apologizing. It might be how you recover from severe defeats with elegance that defies sense. It might be the natural authority you project while speaking, a weightiness that compels respect without ever asking it. Perhaps it is the peaceful, deep tranquility you feel even while your life is chaotic. These traits are divinely magnetic, and they cannot be replicated or imitated by anybody who has not completed the arduous interior effort necessary to develop them. That is why their envy burns so deeply. It depicts the terrible, obvious contrast between the spiritual truth they perceive in you and the spiritual poverty they experience inside themselves. This dynamic is amplified by the fact that your strengths often shed a harsh light on their most vulnerable vulnerabilities without your knowledge. If you come into a room exuding God's peaceful confidence, the individual who has been fighting a devastating, lifetime feeling of self-doubt will feel it as a physical blow. If you approach a problem with calm, solution-oriented thinking, the person who panics about little issues will notice and dislike you for it. And if you live a real, transparent life, people who are still hiding behind carefully crafted masks will recognize in you the freedom they secretly want but are too afraid to pursue. That wordless, pained understanding ultimately turns into a nagging, constant annoyance. Your entire presence serves as live evidence that their arguments are just that, excuses. This is the underlying reason why their envy is seldom based on anything you do wrong. It is about you being a live, breathing reminder of the person they want to be and the potential they have yet to realize. That is a particularly difficult pill for a weak ego to swallow. So, rather of humbling themselves to learn from you, they choose the simpler, more proud path. They detest you. But do not overlook the ultimate irony. Their jealousy, in its purest form, is a deep type of respect that they are too proud to ever exhibit. It indicates they recognize your heavenly importance, even if they would rather die than express it. And, whether they like it or not, in the spiritual court of their own conscience, they have already admitted that you are ahead of the game because you have something they just cannot ignore. Number 3, they don't envy your life. They envy your capacity to live it. People sometimes make the mistaken impression that envy is mostly about what you own, your vehicle, home, work, and apparently ideal lifestyle. However, in most situations, particularly for the selected ones, it is not about the worldly trappings at all. What they actually, sincerely envy is your capacity to live your life in the manner you do. It is the ethereal spirit that drives the material universe. It is the ability to face enormous problems while maintaining a positive attitude. It is your ability to make big, life-changing choices while remaining resilient in the face of pressure and criticism. It is your unwavering determination to keep going ahead, growing, and believing while maintaining your fundamental sense of self. That is the portion they can't understand since they haven't mastered it on their own. There are innumerable individuals in this world who have much more worldly possessions than you, but they can't bear to see you happy. Why is that? Because genuine, long-term pleasure is not a result of acquiring more possessions. It is the heavenly outcome of knowing who you are in God and steadfastly refusing to let life's difficulties to deprive you of your identity. There are those who have a lot of money yet lack inner serenity. Others have enormous influence but lack true delight. You may not have what they have on paper, but you do have something far rarer and incomparably more valuable: the mental fortitude to keep your soul intact no matter what life throws at you. This is exactly why your resistance seems so dangerous to them. The world has conditioned them to think that when life becomes tough, it will shatter you. They have absorbed the myth that adversity always leads to bitterness and loss. Nonetheless, you stand before them as alive, breathing counterexample to that untruth. You have shown that it does not have to be that way. You've been through seasons of betrayal, loss, and disappointment that would have left them bitter and cynical. Instead of being wounded and hardened, you emerged smarter, more empathetic, and more certain in your mission. To them, spiritual alchemy is nearly inhuman. It contradicts the limitations of their narrow, worldly awareness. It immediately confronts the comforting explanations individuals give themselves about why they can't change, why they're stuck, or why they can't overcome their own difficulties. They may attempt to minimize your accomplishments or pretend that your life isn't really outstanding. They'll look for weaknesses to emphasize. But deep down, in those quiet times when they are alone with their thoughts, they understand the reality. It's not about the items you've accumulated throughout your trip. It's about the person you've been shaped into by the flames you've faced. And that, the person you have become, is something they cannot purchase, fabricate, or borrow. Your strength, perspective, emotional and spiritual stability, these are the true jewels. They are the reason you can grin in the midst of a storm, discover divine answers where others perceive dead ends, and maintain your identity while the world tries to tear it apart. That is why their envy is so intense. You are living evidence that tranquility, confidence, and strength can be achieved without every outward circumstance being flawless. And for someone who still thinks that in order to be happy, the whole world must alter, your presence is the most shocking and compelling fact they will ever encounter. Number 4. Your existence highlights their missed opportunities. People experience a distinct and intense uneasiness when your presence unintentionally reminds them of the life they may have had but did not. This isn't usually about jealousy in the classic sense of desiring what you have. It is often about a deep, nagging remorse that has disguised itself as displeasure with you. Every time they see you thriving, taking bold, faith-filled steps, or walking in a reality you created through sheer risk and persistence, they are unwillingly forced to confront a painful truth. Those same opportunities may have been available to them at some point, but they chose not to take action. That is a really hefty mirror to stare into. Because, although they may superficially blame their circumstances, time, or other people for their inaction, deep down, in the caves of their conscience, they know the actual reason they didn't act. When the opportunity arose, they did not take the necessary risk. They let the voice of dread scare them out of attempting. Alternatively, they let the voice of pride to persuade them that the opportunity was beneath them or not worth the risk of failure. Now you stand before them as live, breathing evidence of what may have occurred if they had faced the unknown with bravery rather than fear. What makes this hurt even more is that your accomplishments make their nagging, what-if concerns difficult to ignore. Without you in their field of sight, they may convince themselves that pursuing certain aspirations was a stupid attempt that would have failed anyhow. They may build a story in which their inactivity was really wisdom. But when you're standing right there, a physical example of victory against the odds, that soothing illusion crumbles into 1,000 pieces. By just existing, you have eliminated their favorite excuse. And, rather than being inspired by your example, some people will take the route of bitterness, since it is much simpler to be furious with you for achieving than to be unhappy at themselves for passing up their own opportunity. You never meant to be a personal reminder of their previous failings. You were just living your life, making decisions that were consistent with your divine mission. But for them, each of your accomplishments seems like a personal spotlight on their inactivity. Every risk you made that paid off turns into a subtle, stinging accusation, not from you, but from their own conscience. That is why they may abruptly withdraw themselves from you, intentionally attempt to belittle your success, or appear to ignore your advancement. It is a desperate self-defense tactic. If they can avoid you, they think they can escape the truth you represent. However, the reality remains. Your mere existence demonstrates the stark, unmistakable difference between a life lived bravely and a life spent safely. While some may ultimately utilize that fact to motivate them to rewrite their own tale, others will stay trapped, harboring a deep grudge over the life they might have had if they had chosen bravery over comfort. Number 5. Their bitterness is fueled by your freedom. Freedom is one of those things that people strongly want until they see someone living it in front of them. When you start making decisions without passing them through the oppressive filter of public acceptance, you realize how confined and imprisoned certain individuals really are. They may make a great deal about their independence and enjoying life on their own terms, but the silent fact is that they are still privately tied to the views of their family, friends, colleagues, and even random strangers online. Your unabashed freedom drives them to confront their own limitations, which many would rather die than face. Their caustic, cutting tone while speaking to you isn't usually because they disagree with your decisions. It's about having the boldness and fortitude to create them without first seeking approval from a committee. You wear clothing that you genuinely enjoy, not merely what is presently popular and accepted. You express your opinion confidently, without waiting for someone to nod in favor first. You take chances that make sense to your soul, even if others think you're mad. You are leading a life that is consistent with your internal, God-given compass, rather than the generic, one-size-fits-all rulebook that society has provided you. And since they have been methodically groomed to think that every single decision must be justified and authorized by the group, your unrestricted and sovereign attitude strikes them as profoundly, even rebelliously repulsive. The terrible irony is that your independence has absolutely no negative impact on them. In fact, if they were in a better spiritual condition, it may greatly motivate them. However, for someone who is still trapped within a cage and has no idea it has been locked from the inside, seeing another bird fly freely over the sky is a tormented and terrible sight. They aren't upset because you're doing anything ethically wrong. They are upset because you are doing something they wish they had the bravery to accomplish. Your existence makes it more harder for them to hold onto the tenuous idea that external approbation is the ultimate measure of a person's value. Furthermore, your independence gradually undermines one of their favorite justifications for their own passivity. They can't persuade themselves, "Oh, nobody can really do that," because you've already done it. They can't claim that the crowd's view is an unbreakable, universal rule when you've previously defied it and succeeded nevertheless. That fact drastically destroys their comfort zone, and in many situations, individuals develop resentment against anybody who encourages them to reconsider their whole way of life. Their resentment isn't about you breaching the rules. It is about showing, through your own life, that the rules they were so terrified of were never genuine in the first place. And once someone realizes this, they have just two options: muster the fortitude to alter their life, or live with the cruel knowledge that they have always held the key to their own prison. Number 6. You have power without their approval. Most individuals are programmed from infancy to think that power is given to them by others. They are taught that in order to be deemed relevant, you must be loved by the right people, selected for the appropriate jobs, or supported by the right prominent voices. They grow up craving acceptability, believing that it is the key to power and relevance. So when they meet someone like you, who exudes natural, God-given authority without having it conferred upon you by the crowd, it is not just startling, it is profoundly, fundamentally disruptive. You did not wait for someone to lay a crown on your head before you began living like royalty in your own life. You did not stand in line waiting for someone else's approval. You did not distort and shrink to meet a gatekeeper's arbitrary list. Instead, you gained credibility via your deeds. You acted on your own authority, guided by your own beliefs. You refused to shrink for anyone's comfort. This is very concerning for those who have based their whole feeling of self-worth on being liked, selected, or approved of, since it undermines the fundamental framework on which they depend to feel significant. The most frightening aspect for them is that your authority is not negotiable. If someone's influence stems simply on public acceptance, it may be revoked in an instant. One false rumor, one change in public opinion, one scandal, and their whole platform falls to ashes. However, when your influence is based on your character, resilience, expertise, and consistency, external forces cannot take it away from you. That makes you impenetrable in ways they cannot compete with, since in order to equal your level of sovereign power, they would have to entirely rebuild themselves from the inside out. This is why some individuals will go to tremendous measures to criticize, discredit, or undermine you, frequently using subtle and passive-aggressive tactics. They badly need to think that your authority is fictitious, unstable, or founded on chance. The alternative, that you developed it yourself and don't need their approval to keep it going, forces them to confront the scary reality that they've been seeking a cheap, watered-down form of power all along. Your very existence becomes a living, talking contradiction to their whole worldview. You demonstrate that genuine influence is not given out like a prize at a ceremony. It is something you claim, grow, and embody via your relationship with the divine. And for those who are still waiting for permission to completely live their life, this is not just daunting, but also irritating. Because deep down, somewhere they dare not look, they understand they may have been doing the same thing all along. However, they didn't. And you did. If this message strikes a chord deep inside your spirit, it's because you're a member of the God Connection family, a tribe of anointed souls who refuse to play small. This road of living in your spiritual power might seem isolated, but please know that you are not alone. To remain connected and get these spiritually nourishing insights, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell right now. Your participation helps us expand this strong community. And if you feel compelled to support our ministry and help us continue to share this light, you can join our mission by making a $10 gift via the Super Thanks button directly below this video. Every seed planted allows us to reach another chosen one who needs to be reminded of their power. Thank you for your support. Now, let us come back to the reality. Number 7. They see you thriving where they prayed you would fail. People experience a unique and very cruel kind of frustration when the precise scenario they were persuaded would ruin them becomes the magnificent platform on which they shine the brightest. They were expecting the storm to shatter you. They fully expected you to break under the enormity of the obstacles you faced. They waited in secret, hoping that you would lose yourself in the commotion, give up, and fade quietly into the shadows of failure so that they could write the ultimate, terrible finale to your narrative. Instead, you chose the unfathomable. You adapted. You've learned. You grew. You not only survived the attack, but you came out of it stronger, clearer, and more confident of your mission than ever before. That utter reversal of their expectations bothers them in ways they would never confess out loud. When someone secretly, or not so secretly, wishes for your failure, it is not necessarily motivated only by malice. Sometimes your failure would have been a suitable reason for their own worries and inactivity. If you had gone down in flames, it would have proven their own limiting beliefs, that striving is worthless, that the odds are always insurmountable, and that it is much safer and smarter to never take any serious risks. But you didn't go down. You demonstrated the exact opposite. You demonstrated that it is possible to meet the most powerful storms full on and yet come out triumphant. That is not just uncomfortable for their worldview. It is truly, genuinely disturbing. Because they are now compelled to consider if their own constraints are genuine or whether they are self-imposed prisons of their own creation. What makes it worse for them is the unmistakable confidence you now exude, forged in the exact flames that were supposed to consume you. It is one thing to just survive a distressing event. It's another thing completely to emerge with your head held high and your spirit not just intact, but polished and enhanced. That type of spiritual power cannot be faked, nor can it be provided to you by someone else. It's earned in the crucible. Every genuine grin you wear, every calm and intelligent choice you make, and every stride forward you take serves as a subtle, strong reminder to them that they grossly overestimated you. This is why their jealousy is not fleeting. It is intense, intimate, and enduring. You not only prove them incorrect, but you did it in front of everyone. You let the storm do its worst, yet you refused to shrink. And now, instead of telling the awful tale they had planned about your demise, they are forced to see a heavenly narrative of perseverance, triumph, and anointing unfold right in front of their doubting eyes. The reality is, nothing disarms and enrages people who doubted you more than watching you prosper in the same area they said you would fail. Because, in their thoughts, you were never intended to be here. Yet here you are, demonstrating not just that you could, but that you were designed for it all along. Number 8. You demonstrate that their excuses were always just excuses. People cling to their justifications like they're lifeboats in a stormy sea. They will tell themselves and anyone who will listen that the timing is not right, that they lack the resources, that the odds are stacked against them, or that people like me just can't do certain things. These narratives become comfortable not because they are true, but because they effectively remove the enormous pressure to actually try. So when you come along and accomplish success despite your own considerable set of challenges, it does more than simply excite them. It undermines the entire basis of the restrictive myths they've been telling themselves for years. Your triumph stands as a living, breathing contradiction to their whole story of impossible. You may have begun with less money, fewer contacts, or experienced more terrible losses than they did, but you found a way to go ahead. That fact alone makes them very uncomfortable because it reveals the truth. Their can't was never a true wall. It was a decision. And accepting that would require them to confront the very unpleasant fact that the major thing holding them back is not their surroundings, but themselves. Rather than allowing your narrative to inspire them to change, many will choose the road of least resistance, bitterness. Resentment is an effective shield. It permits people to disregard your accomplishments rather than humbling themselves and learning from them. It allows people to say things like, well, they must have had some hidden help, or they just got lucky, rather than face the much more probable prospect that discipline, risk, and unflinching tenacity were the most important factors. By fabricating these false narratives about you, they are able to maintain their own excuses without having to make any difficult adjustments in their life. The wonderful irony is that you probably didn't even attempt to prove anything to them. You were just living your life, taking the risks you were compelled to take, and performing the hard, unnoticed labor day after day. However, in doing so, you accidentally highlighted the immense, yawning divide between what is genuinely attainable and what they have settled for. And that gap is an unsettling sight to see because it forces a choice: develop or remain static. Most people will prefer to remain stagnant because true change demands enormous work, and effort means letting go of the tempting comfort of excuses. As a result, resentment serves as their armor. But, deep down, they understand the truth. If you could do it, there's no reason they couldn't have tried. That is the unstated reason people follow you so closely, not to applaud your path, but to urgently look for any defect, any error, that would make your climb seem less threatening than their own stasis. The difficulty for them is that the evidence you offer cannot be reversed. Number 9. You refuse to wear the guilt that they project upon you. Some individuals are not only uncomfortable with your success, but also extremely insulted by your refusal to apologize for it. They have been conditioned by a mediocre world to believe that anyone who rises above the crowd has a social obligation to tone it down, hide their light, or constantly explain and justify themselves so that others do not feel less than. When you refuse to participate in this charade, you violate an unspoken social rule, which completely throws them off balance. They'll try to use shame as an invisible leash, a subtle but effective technique to bring you back into line with the rest of the herd. However, refusing to accept the bait irritates them to no end. They will structure their guilt trips in ways that seem deceptively rational. They will remark things like, "You've changed," in a disappointed tone. Or they will offer a passive-aggressive reminder, "Don't forget where you came from." The most common attack is the direct accusation, "You think you're better than everyone else now." The goal of these statements is not to start a genuine discussion, but to plant a tiny seed of self-doubt in you. They may slow down your momentum if they can make you question yourself or feel even somewhat guilty about your blessings. Guilt becomes their most effective instrument of control, keeping you tiny enough to make them feel safe. Your reluctance to bear the projected guilt is so deeply frightening because it leaves them with nothing to hold over your head. People who rely on emotional manipulation to feel strong cannot manage someone who sees straight through the game and goes away unharmed. Not only are you resistant to their techniques, but you are also proving to others that it is possible to be immune. And it is very hazardous for someone whose whole feeling of power is based on the consent of others. By calmly rejecting their guilt trips, you convey a clear and strong message that they can't ignore. You can achieve without apologizing. You can stand out without shrinking. And you may select your own route without having to defend it to anybody. Some individuals are outraged by this kind of unashamed, sovereign living because it undermines the social dynamic in which they feel they have the authority to pick who may shine and how brightly. This isn't about your arrogance. It's about spiritual limits. You have simply determined that you would no longer lower your light in order to make others more comfortable in their self-imposed darkness. And, although making that brave decision may cost you the acceptance of some insecure circles, it provides you with something much more valuable: the freedom to live without being bound by the fears of others. For those who use guilt as their main weapon, your independence is not just annoying. It is a complete loss of control. Number 10. You disrupt the hierarchy that they thought was permanent. Certain individuals base their whole sense of value on the flimsy assumption that they will always be superior to you in life, whether socially, financially, or in terms of influence. They have confined you to a narrow, confining mental cage, forever identifying you as less than, so that they may feel safe and superior in their own position. It is not usually a deliberate malevolent act at first. Sometimes it's simply the lazy comfort of familiarity. They have a position for you and a part for themselves, and they like the regularity of the arrangement. However, as you begin to develop, climb, and transcend the restrictions they have mentally given to you, the unspoken hierarchy is shaken to its very core. Suddenly, the pecking order they believed was permanent vanished, and delicate egos don't take such disturbance well. Your expansion does not just surprise them, it actively threatens them. They are forced to face the truth that the position they assumed you would play indefinitely, the one that was comfortably beneath them, has changed. You are no longer the one who constantly asks for assistance, seeks their favor, or waits for them to open doors for you. You are providing your own assistance, approving of yourself, and constructing your own doors. This pushes them to view you in a new light, which for some is a highly unpleasant and painful process since it requires them to reconsider their own position in the world. This reversal is particularly challenging for folks who have identified themselves as being ahead of you. If their self-esteem was primarily based on that comparison, your accomplishment seems like a personal loss. You haven't stolen anything physical from them, but your climb has closed the confidence gap. They can no longer stare down at you to make themselves feel taller. This is the moment when you'll notice tiny but substantial changes in their conduct. Some will become cold and aloof, seeking to create a new kind of separation. Others will deliberately want to sabotage your success, aiming to return the hierarchy to its normal form. To preserve face, a few may even change their minds and say they always trusted you. But behind all of these differing emotions is the same single truth. You have disturbed the way they have always assessed themselves, and they are unsure how to respond. What makes this change so spiritually profound is that it demonstrates that most social structures are illusions, based on subjective experience rather than actual fact. When you climb, you demonstrate that those purportedly permanent positions are not stable at all. They are just temporary placeholders, waiting for someone with the bravery and anointing to outgrow them. This is precisely what you've done. You have outgrown the narrow, confined position they gave you, and they must now bend their heads up to see you. For someone with a sensitive and insecure ego, this is more than simply a shift. It's a seismic earthquake.